Dear students, today we shall be talking about the adaptations in hill stream fishes. Before moving on, it is my request to you all to like and subscribe my channel Biolearnia. Before exactly knowing about the adaptations in the hill stream fishes, first of all we should be knowing the environment, the habitat wherein these very fishes do live in, or what are the conditions that these very fishes have to face. We all know that the large number of the rivers, streams, rivulets, lakes, they are present in hills, and the present ecological conditions that are quite different from those of the plains. So it means whatsoever conditions are present in the plains, they are not present in the hill streams, or whatever conditions are present in the hill streams, they are quite different from those of the plains. And when we talk about their zonation, the zonation of these very streams, it is longitudinal instead of the horizontal zonation. This very horizontal zonation is mostly found in the deep waters, but it cannot be found in the case of the shallow waters. So that is why in the case of shallow waters, we do make the zones, or we do classify the zones on terms of the longitudinal direction of the river. Lillies and Botosa Nianu in 1963, they recognized two major subdivisions of a river course. First, course that is which is very much steep, which is torrential. He called that very course as the rethron. That is, it means that very upper course which is very steep, which comes from the higher to the lower in a very fast direction. We call such very course as the torrential course, or the upper course we call it as the rethron. So this we call it as the rethron. But another course, that is the lower one, which is not so steep but is slow flowing, this very course is called as the potamon. So the difference between these two is that rethron is fast flowing, potamon is slow moving. The rethron is very steep, the potamon is not so steep. So even the organisms present in the different zones, they are quite different from one another, or they may be different from those present in the plains. So that is why these very hill streams, they are quite different from that of the plains. And this very rethron zone quietly differs from the potamon zone in the geomorphology, in physicochemical properties, in the nature of the substratum, in the biota present, or the bacterial density present. So it means that this very rethron and the potamon zones of a stream, they are quite different from one another. Now, the conditions of the hill stream, they are quite different from that of the other water bodies. The conditions which the fishes have to face, that makes them the specialized to live in that very particular area. So the conditions which the fishes do face in the hill streams are the conditions which are present in the hill stream, that is, we shall be discussing one by one, such as the strength of the water current. And we all know that the water current in the hill streams, it is very rapid and strong. Those very fishes which live in the water, they have to face, or they have to withstand these swift currents. And that is why these very fishes, they develop adhesive mechanisms. They develop adhesive mechanism. so as to withstand the fast flowing conditions of the water. The second important thing is that the availability of the food. The food is available in plenty. The food in the form of the algae, the food in the form of the insects, they are available in the hill streams. But because of the fast flowing stream or fast flowing water, the food in the form of the worms or the crustaceans, they can be scarce. Though the plants cannot grow, also cannot grow because of the fast flowing nature of the water, fast flowing, you can say, water. The third important thing these very fishes have to face is the intensity of the light. So water is crystal clear in the hill streams, crystal clear water. You should be experiencing yourself that when you see the water of the hill stream, it is crystal clear and you can see the bottom of the stream. And that is why these very organisms have to face the bright sunlight, bright sunlight. That is, intensity of the light is very high in case of the hill stream because the plants cannot grow there, and secondly it is very much clear and the intensity of the light is very much high. They have to adapt to live in the high intensity of the light. The fourth important factor that is present in the case of the hill stream is the dissolved oxygen content. Now, if we talk about the dissolved oxygen content in the case of the hill streams, in the case of the hill streams, the water is well aerated. It has the plenty of the dissolved oxygen because of the fast flowing nature of the water, fast flowing, you can say, water. It strikes with the pebbles and the stones, and it also which also helps in the dissolution of the atmospheric oxygen with that of the water. That is why it has the higher quantity of the dissolved oxygen. And for the sake of the knowledge, you should be knowing that the white waters have the more oxygen content than that of the other waters. The last but not the least, the important factor which these very fishes have to face is the temperature. These very fishes, they have to tolerate the extreme environmental, you can say, condition because the water is shallow. It is liable to be affected by the atmospheric temperature as well. Whereas in other cases, if the water is very deep, the fishes do go deep so as to avoid the fluctuation in the temperature. But in the case of the hill streams, these very fishes have to tolerate the extreme environmental condition. So there are certain pools and ditches as well wherein little bit of the stagnant water can be there, but most of the times the hill streams are very fast flowing. They are having the stones and the pebbles. There is always the danger of being crushed by these very pebbles and stones which come in a very fast manner from the upper reaches to the lower reaches. So these are the conditions which these very fishes have to face. Now it is against, or it is to avoid these very conditions, or to adopt to these very conditions, the fishes modified themselves so that they can be comfortable in these very conditions wherein there is the strength of the water current is high, the ability of the food is very high, intensity of the light is high, dissolved oxygen is high, and the temperature fluctuation is more. Now, first of all, we shall be talking about this. You should be having the knowledge about the certain hill stream fishes, such as some of the fishes which belong to the family Sisoridae, such as we do have the fish such as Glyptothorax, we do have the fish such as Glyptosternum, we do have the Pseudoechinus, we do have the Aristis, Aristis. Then from the family Sabiridae, which is one of the biggest families, We do have the fishes such as we do have the barbels, which is now known as the tor. We do have the labio, we do have the schizothorax, we do have the crossocylus. Now there are certain other fishes such as Barilius, Balitora, Bhavania. We do have the Cyprinus, we do the Coelorhynchus, we do have the Paracoelorhynchus. So you should be having the knowledge about all these very fishes, or you should be at least knowing the names of these very hill stream fishes. I shall be repeating again, such as Barbus, Labio, Gara, Schizothorax, Barilius, Balitora, Bavania, Crassocylus, Cyprinus, Coelorhynchus, and Paracoelorhynchus. Now, among this very, you must be very much amazed to know that Labio is also, some of the species of the Labio, they are also the hill stream, they also live in the hill stream, and whereas some others, they have adapted to live in the very Potamon zone, or you can say the slow moving waters. Now, there are certain other fishes which belong to the family Cobitidae. So we do have the examples such as we do have the Lepidocephalichthys guntia, we do have the Botia, we do have the Nemachilus, we do have the Nemachilus rupicola. So we do have the different kinds of the fishes which belong to the Cobitidae. We do have the from the family Homalopteridae. We do have the example of the Homaloptera. We do have the from the family Chanidae. We do have the Chana Gachua, which we call it as a snakehead. These are the photographs of the certain fishes. Some of the important hill stream fishes, such as we do have the Gara, we do have the Glyptothorax, we do have the Barbus, we do have the Pseudoechinus, we do have the Labio, we do have the Gara, we do have the Gara, we do have the Schizothorax, then we do have the Laguvia, we do have the Aristichthys. So we shall be talking about their modifications later on. First of all, we shall be knowing that what are hill stream fishes actually. When we talk about the hill stream fishes, they can be divided into two. The first we call them as the temporary inhabitants, whereas other we call them as the permanent inhabitants. Now, what are the temporary inhabitants? Those very species which migrate upstream for the purpose of the spawning. So some of the fishes which only come to the hill stream for the purpose of the spawning, so as to get the benefits of the abundant food, and a place where there are very less or no predators, a place which is very highly oxygenated. So some of the fishes do come to breed in the hill streams. Those very fishes we call them as the temporary inhabitants, because they only come during the spawning period and then they leave and they go to the downstream. But some of the fishes we call them as the permanent inhabitants, because those very fishes, they are adapted. They are basically adapted to live in those very ecological conditions which we studied a few moments earlier. Now, what are the adaptations, or what kind of adaptations are seen in the case of the hill stream fishes? There are various adaptations which are seen in the case of hill stream fishes. The adaptations which we see in the form of the size, shape, and body form, that is, these fishes have modified their body so that they can be suited to live in these very hill streams. There is adaptation in the case of eyes as well. There's adaptation in the case of scales, the position of the mouth and lips, the barbels, the paired fins, the pectoral and the pelvic girdles. There we do find adaptation in the gill aperture and the branchiostegal rays. We do find adaptation in their skeleton. We do find adaptation in their air bladder as well. Now we shall be talking one by one. When we talk about their size and shape, now this is very interesting one. That these very hill stream fishes, they are generally small, because they have reduced their body, because the larger size of the body that cannot be suited to counter the strong flow of the water. So that is why the hill stream fishes, they have adapted themselves to the small body size, which is greatly flattened also. Now what you are seeing here in the case of these very fishes, you are seeing that the fish is looking a leaf like, so that this very fish also, you can see that it is somewhat flattened. The fish has flattened itself. This we call it as the dorsoventrally flattened body. So at least anterior portion is dorsoventrally flattened so that they can escape under the rocks and the stones, so as to avoid the strong flow of the water. So this is very interesting. Are some of the fishes such as Crossocylus, you see that they are still streamlined because they do live in the zones which are not having so torrential or the so swift water. So the they possess the dorsoventrally flattened body. Their body becomes leaf-like, and they are specialized species, such as we do have the glyptothorax, we do have the glyptosternum, we do have the pseudoechinus. These very fishes, they are dorsoventrally flattened. So dorsal surface of the hill stream fishes is mostly arched. What we are seeing here, that this very feature, this is arched. The body is arched, while the ventral surface, we are seeing that it is flattened. The head of the hill stream fishes is generally small and it is semicircular. So when these very fishes, they press against the bottom, their flattened ventral surface does not permit the water to escape. So they cannot flow with the current of the water. That is why this very dorsoventral flattening of the body, mostly on the ventral side, it prevents them from being taken away by the current of the water. So the shape of the body of the fish, it depends upon the strength and the current in which it lives. So the fish is living in the streams where the flow of the water current or the water current is almost, you can say, slow. So the fishes are mostly cylindrical, having the cylindrical bodies, such as I told you about the Crassocylus latius or the Labiogonius or the Torputidora. So very fast flowing part of the stream, the fish are, you can say, dorsoventrally flattened, whereas in the case of those very you can say areas uh, the where this water current is slow, the body is somewhat cylindrical. So secondly, if we talk about the eyes, if you talk about the eyes, they are generally small in size. And secondly, what we see, that these being, on one hand, these being the smaller in size, they are pushed upward. They are pushed upward. That is, they are now moved toward the upper part, so that the eyes become closer to one another. So these very eyes now, they are closer to one another. And the examples of such kind of fishes are Balitora brucei. We do have the Balitora brucei. This is the example of the Balitora brucei. We do have the Glyptothorax, and this is the example of the Pseudoechinus. So what we studied, that in these very fishes, the eyes have become small, almost in comparison. The eyes are small and they are pushed upside, so that the distance between the two eyes now has become less. So secondly, we shall be talking about the scales. Now the scales are the important, you can say, exoskeleton of the fish. But in the case of hill stream fishes, the scales have reduced. There are very minute scales are embedded in skin, such as in the case of Schizothorax. The scales are very minute, are there embedded in skin, such as we do the example of the Schizothorax, we do the example of the Orineus. But in some species, the scales are present on the dorsal and the lateral side of the body, but they are reduced or even absent on the lateral side. So it means that they are present on the dorsal and the lateral sides of the body, but are reduced or absent on the ventral side. And in some cases, the scales are present only on the scapular region or the anal region. and in some cases there are no scales, the scales are not found in many cases, such as Gara rosicus, Gara abhoi. So it means that the scales are reduced. Now what is the purpose? That the scales, they prevent the, you can say, so as to avoid the friction, more and more friction. Now they have their scales, they have reduced their scales so that they can swim swiftly in the water, or the scales are mostly embedded, they are reduced, or scales are not present at all in the case of the hill stream fishes. Now if we talk about the position of the mouth and the lips, now this is very interesting one. If we talk about the position of the mouth and the lips, now besides, it is not that the mouth is only involved in the case of the ingestion or the eating or the, you can say, scraping of the this very eating purpose, but now the mouth is modified in the case of the hill stream fishes, and it is mostly shifted to the ventral side. Now what we are seeing here, that it is mostly shifted onto the ventral side. So many cases what we are seeing, that this is here in what you are seeing, that this is the mouth. Herein you are seeing the mouth, it is totally ventral in position. Or in the case of this very Nemacales, you are seeing that the mouth is present on the ventral side. And mostly it is not that it is only involved in the feeding and taking in the water, but it is now also involved in scrapping of the algae which are present in the abundant quantity in the hill streams. So that is why now these very hill stream fishes, they do have the what we see in them, that they do have the thick lips, they have the strong jaws to help in the scrapping of the food. So the scrapping of the food is very important, that because the food is present in the form of the algae on the stone, so they have to scrap those very algae from the stone. And in the case of Nemacales, what we are seeing here, in the case of Nemacales, what we are seeing here, that the lip is divided in middle. Here in this very part, you are seeing the division in divided in the middle, and this is a swollen. The lips are somewhat swollen. The lips are somewhat swollen, and thus this form a ring like sucker. So this very mouth is now acting as a ring like sucker. It is used for the attachment, it is used to attach themselves to the substratum. In the case of Schizothorax also, the mouth has a horny covering. So this is very important, that if somebody asks you that which of the following fish has the horny covering, so you can clearly say that it is present in the case of the Schizothorax, whereas the lips are swollen in the case of Nemacales, or lips are divided in the middle and swollen in the case of Nemacales, whereas the horny covering, this very you are seeing here, the lips, the horny covering is present in the case of, in this very case you are seeing the horny covering, this is present in the case of the Schizothorax. Now the second important thing, I was talking about the position of this very lips. It is that the lips of the Balitora, they are produced into several tentaculate processes, so that they can be effective suckers, so that they can attach themselves to the strong to the substrate to avoid the strong currents of the water. So they are having the tentaculate processes. So in the case of the Homeloptera, the lips are very thick, they are tuberculated, and they provide sucker for the attachment to the stones. But here in what we see in the case of the glyptothorax or the glyptosternum, they are reflected and spread around the mouth. So you are seeing that the lips are spread around the mouth, thus forming a sucker like structure. So in the case of glyptothorax and glyptosternum, this sucker like process can be seen as a modification on the lips. Now talking about these very barbels which are sensory in function, that these very barbels are reduced, and they are short and stumpy in the case of the hill stream fishes. They develop thick and fleshy base with striations or tubercles. The barbels also provide the additional, you can say, support for the attachment to the stones and the rocks. Now, some of the fishes which do possess barbels, they are glyptosternum, and such as glyptosternum. We do have the glyptothorax or the nemechilus. These very fishes, they do bear the barbels, and the barbels are modified and reduced to shorter in length, and they become short and stumpy. Now, when we talk about their paired fins, mostly when we talk about the paired fins, we have to talk about the pelvic and the pectoral and the pelvic fins. So these very pectoral, they are modified in the case of the pectorals. These are the pectorals which are modified in the case of the hill stream fishes. The outer rays of the paired fins, they are modified for the addition. They are having certain hooks which are mostly used for the purpose of the addition. They are present on the inner rays, and thus the inner rays are also increased. These very outer rays, they become thick and flat. The fins, they are shifted outwards, and they come to lie horizontally along the sides of the body so that they can facilitate in addition. They are more broader in the case of the hill stream fishes. The outer rays, they are thick and flat, and they serve for the addition, while the inner rays, they are directed upwards against the sides of the body, and they are kept in motion, and this very motion leads to the to are this very motion of these very inner rays, it helps in the respiration as well, because it moves the water faster toward the gills. That is why it also helps in the respiration. And mostly the pectorals and the pelvics, they are modified, they are broader now. They solve the purpose of the addition. They have the number of the inner rays, and they are involved in attaching themselves to the substrate. Now, when we talk about the skeleton and mostly the pectoral and the pelvic girdle, now we have to talk a little bit about the girdles as well, because these very girdles, they provide support to the pectoral and the pelvic fins. So it is the girdle which provides the support to the pelvic and the pectoral pectoral fins. So in the case of the hill stream fishes, and mostly in the case of the glyptothorax and the pseudokynus, these very pelvic girdles, they are modified. In such, the bones are of the pelvic girdle, they are fused to provide strength. They are fused to provide strength, and also the place for the attachment to the muscles. So that is why muscles are attached to these very pelvic and the pectoral girdles. They provide strength, and moreover the keel like ridges, they are prominent to provide attachment to the muscles. And also, the adductor and the abductor muscles are well developed, and four extra muscles, they are developed to move the spine. So it is used for the proper movement of these very fins as well as the spine. So the shape of the pectoral girdle is also different due to the horizontal position of the gills. So of the fins, of the fins. So the shape of the pectoral girdle is also different due to the horizontal position of the fins. Now, when we talk about the gill aperture and the branchiostegal rays. Now, what is the gill aperture? When we talk about the gill aperture, this is the gill aperture. So the opercular bone covers this very gill aperture. This is the gill aperture. And you are seeing in the case of the hill stream fishes, this very gill aperture is very small as compared to those very fishes which are found in the plains. Now, one more important thing is that when we see underside, that in the case of the fishes which are living in the plains, or which are living in the slow moving waters, here in the gills are extended toward the extended. I just be using the different color. So it is extended to the ventral side like this, like this. But in the case of hill stream fishes, thou this very portion which I marked here, this is totally used for the addition, so the gills cannot be present on the lower side. So gills are only restricted to the lateral side, and that too toward the side of the body. So in some species what we see, such as Gara, we see the gill openings, they are little bit wider, though they are little bit wider, but they are separated by a considerable distance. But in the case of Glyptosternum, the gills are situated above the base of the pectoral fins with very narrow passage from the anterior of the gill chamber to the exterior. So as the chest is involved in the attachment in the form of the adhesion, so that is why the gills are restricted to the lateral side and toward the side. So the restriction of the gill opening to the side, it also affects the respiration in the case of fishes. But when the but this is also compensated by the narrow, you can say, narrow passage, because it takes when the fish takes water, it takes longer time to get out, and thus the more you can say time more time is given to the water to so that the oxygen gets mixed or oxygen gets, you can say, exchanged. So secondly, when the fish is feeding on the algal slime or is attached to the rocks and the stones, respiration may become difficult. But various factors which help in the respiration, they are that is why I was talking about that. So there are certain factors which help in the respiration. Though this is not a good thing that the gill slits are very narrow, but there are certain factors which help them to live in such very condition, because the water in the hills, it is heavily or highly oxygenated. That is why the gills are, you can say, narrow. That is compensated. So the gill openings being small, the fish is able to retain more water in the branchial chamber for a longer duration of the time. So the inner rays of the pectoral fins, they are kept in the constant motion as well, which I was talking in my previous slide, and it forces the water in and out of the gill opening as well. So the pectoral fins also help in the constant, which are in the constant motion, they also help to force the water in and out of the gill opening as well. Now talking about the air bladder. Air bladder has a hydrostatic function. It is mostly used in, or it is well developed in those very fishes which do live in the deeper waters, which have to wherein the fish has to get down and come up. So it is very much well developed in those very fishes. But in the case of hill stream fishes, where there is shallow water, so the condition of the hill stream is that the water is very shallow and they do not need air bladder, and hence it is considerably reduced or it is degenerate. And secondly, when we talk about the glyptosternum or the glyptothorax or the pseudoechinus, the swim bladder is divided into two lateral chambers. So what we are seeing here in the case of the in these very three fishes, that this very gill swim bladder, it is divided into two lateral chambers, and it is connected by a short narrow transverse tube, and is generally encapsulated in the bony covering. So it means that the function of the air bladder is also reduced in the case of the hill stream. The study on the adaptations in the case of the hill stream fishes would be incomplete if we will not study about the adhesive organs in the case of the hill stream fishes. When we talk about these very adhesive organs, the skin between the pectoral fin and the surrounding the mouth, it is variously modified to form the organs of the adhesion. So in the case of few cyprinids, when we see that they show simplest condition, where in the skin of the ventral side it is little bit folded to form the cushion, so that it helps in the adhesion. But in case of the certain fishes which are very much specialized to live in the hill streams, such as Glyptosternum we do have, or the Glyptothorax or Pseudoechinus, the skin is thrown into grooves. For example, here in this very case, what you are seeing here, that the skin is thrown into the grooves which forms an adhesive apparatus. So these very longitudinal grooves, there are certain many cases, these are the longitudinal grooves which are present in the case of the glyptothorax, and it is mostly V-shaped. This is mostly the V-shaped in structure. So these help in the adhesion to some substrate. This is especially seen in the ventral side between the thorax and between these, in the thorax between these pectoral fins. That is, this is the pectoral fin and this is the second pectoral fin on the either side, and it is in between these very two pectoral fins. Where in this very side, that is in the glyptosternum, what you are seeing, that you are seeing the pectoral fin which is having the inner rays, and the rays are having the pectoral spines, or the pectoral fin is having the pectoral spines which is used for the clinging to the substrate. Then we see that in the case of Nemechilus, in the similar, these very grooves are also seen in the case of the Pseudocynus as well. There in the longitudinal grooves are formed, but here in the horizontal grooves are formed, and they form the adhesive organ. And in this case, the U-shaped adhesive organ is formed, whereas in the case of the glyptothorax, the V-shaped adhesive organ is formed. In the case of the Nemechilus, what we see, it is a very simple condition. What is seen in the case of the Nemechilus, that around the mouth, the aperture is surrounded by, this very aperture is surrounded by the horny lips, which function as sucker. I have just talked about this in my earlier slide as well, and this is the lip has thickened and thus formed a sucker, and the base of the pectoral fin is thickened and cushion like. This very base is thickened and the cushion like in the case of Nemechilus. In the case of Schizothorax, what we see, and this very condition in the case of Schizothorax, or in the case of the Crossocylus also, what we see, that there is a callus part, that is the below the lips, a callus shaped structure is seen, which is very hard, and it is used for scraping the algae. So this very callus part, and below this very callus part we see the tubercular disc. So this very callus part and the tubercular disc, these are very much, you can say, modified in structure so as to form as the organ of the adhesion. So I was talking about this very callus. Below this, posterior to this callus part is present the tubercular disc as well. In the case of the Gara gotila, we see that the adhesive organ looks like a disc. Here in this very case, this adhesive organ looks like a disc. In this way, this is again the callus part, and this is the tuberculated part. In this very case also, we see that the adhesive organ, it looks like a disc on the posterior ventral surface, and the tuberculated, you can say, part is also seen just behind the callus part. In the another case, such as in the case of the Leguvia, what we see in the case of the Leguvia, striations are present. These very striations are seen. These very striations on the belly portion or on the chest, they are seen, the striations. And in the case of the Leguvia, they are present on the chest. In the case of the Erethistis, these are present on the belly as well and on the chest as well, and these are having the smooth flattened under surface. But in the case of the elongata, Erethistis elongata, there are well-developed striations as well. In the case of the glyptosternum as well, we do have the many times in the case of the glyptosternum, where the chest is divided of the adhesive apparatus. But in the case of the glyptothorax and the pseudocinus, we have talked about that on the chest, the adhesive organ in the form of the V-shaped or the U-shaped structure is seen, and they are formed by the folding of the skin, and thus they help in the formation of the, you can say, vacuum underneath their body, so as to get attached themselves to the substrate. In the case of the Gara, again we are seeing here that the mouth has a posterior labial fold as well. There is a callus part and a tuberculated part as well, which helps in the adhesion. We have talked about this. Then when we talk about the pseudokinase, we have talked that there is a U-shaped structure, but herein when we talk about the mechanism or the histology, first of all we shall be talking about the histology. That when we talk about this very histology, we see that the skin is formed of the epidermis and the dermis, whereas the epidermis is formed of the several layers of the different cells. We do have the beak shaped cells and the formative cells as well. The larger cells are on the upper side, whereas the smaller cells are toward the inner side. And then again we see that toward the outer side the cuticular spines are present, which are you can say which are the strong spines and are curved near the extremities. We see their curvature, we see curvature there toward the extremities, and this very curvature helps in the clinging to the substrate, and they act as the fasteners or the hooks which help in the attachment to the substrate. These very spines, they are rest on the homogeneous layer of the protoplasm. And secondly, the thickness of the epidermis, they constitute about the 1/3 of the thickness of the epidermis. The cells, I was talking about, the cells decrease toward the inner side. And second important thing is that below these very cells there lies a layer of the columnar cells as well. So the columnar cells are also present below it. And then these very columnar cell, they are followed by the connective tissue. So this is the connective tissue which is below the columnar cells. So this very apparatus, it helps in the clinging, it helps in the adhesion to the substrate. So when we talk about the mechanism of the adhesion, so this is very interesting to know about the mechanism of the adhesion. Generally, the mechanism of the adhesion is believed that the vacuum, it is produced by the ridges and the grooves of the adhesive disc, which brings about the attachment. So it is because of the vacuum produced by these very ridges and the grooves, these very ridges and the grooves which are present on the which is formed as an adhesive disc, and it helps in the attachment to the rocks. So in the case of certain cyprinid fishes such as Schizothorax and the Gara, there are certain cuticular spines which help in the attachment. Whereas in the case of the Silurid fishes such as Glyptothorax and the Pseudokinase, these ridges are pulled outwards and they form a sort of the vacuum so that they can attach themselves to the substrate. So this was all about the adaptations in the case of the hill stream fishes. So today we studied about the different, you can say, adaptations in the case of hill stream fishes. First of all, we talked about the what are the conditions of the hill stream fishes, what are the different kinds of the hill stream fishes. Then we talked a little bit about the conditions of the stream. Then we talked about the different kinds of the organs which the hill streams have modified so that they can better be adapted to live in these very hill streams. Then we talked about the adhesive organs as well, and then we talked about the mechanism of the adhesion and the histology of the adhesive organs as well. Thank you. This was all about the adaptations in the case of hill stream fishes. Next we shall be talking about the origin of the hill stream fish. Thank you very much. It is my request to you all to like and subscribe my channel Biolearnia, and be updated about the new lectures every Sunday. Thank you very much.